Hi, friends. My name is Suze, and today is July 3rd in the year of our Lord 2017. In celebration or introspection or contemplation of what Independence Day should mean to us, I find the best book to go to is the one where they talk about freedom as an American invention. So, since it is that way, I'd like to read to you from my Uncle Charlie's book again. And this book is The Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry for the Southern Jurisdiction of the United States of America, the Mother Supreme Council of the World. And this was compiled by Robert B. Watts, 33 degree, G.C., Director of Education. And this is the foreword from Dynamic Freedoms. It says, in order to form a base for the Dynamic Freedoms booklets which will follow, we are presenting first what in effect are the life-giving and freedom-giving documents of our country. No one can begin to understand the great triumph which was achieved in the formation of the government under which we live without knowing and understanding these. For example, how many people have read our Constitution? Yet this can be done in 20 minutes. In these freedom documents are to be found a deep belief and faith in God, a recognition of the age-old yearnings of men for liberty and dignity, a set of guarantees for the protection of individual rights against ancient abuses, and the reservation in the people of the ultimate power to amend their form of government by prescribed orderly procedures. Equally made clear, as in Washington's farewell address, is the fact that the very idea of the power and the right of the people to establish government presupposes the duty of every individual to obey the established government. The more important of these freedom documents, including some material not heretofore in our booklets, are presented in the booklet. It is the first of a new series of dynamic freedoms, which will be published by the Supreme Council 33 degree. It is hoped that they may be widely read and distributed. And this is signed by the Sovereign Grand Commander. I wish I could read his writing for you, but I know his name was Henry, and I'm sure that someone will know that information, just like this. And just like in every group, remember, there's wonderful people, and that's who we're celebrating. We're not getting tripped up on the other stuff. So I want to go ahead and share screen. Okay. And I promised you guys a little musical entertainment before we dive into the meat of it. And I thought that my friend, Mr. AP's video, Stranger in My Own Hometown, is appropriate. Because, of course, when you get into reading stuff like this, and then you have to come to the understanding of the particulars of why and how we do not have our God-given, inalienable human rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, so on and so forth. We can't have them because the corporation took them and we're dead. And, it's a long, sad, weepy story. But here again, it's okay. And I think even our forefathers would feel like a stranger in their own hometown. So, welcome to the show.
Like a stranger in my home. I'm like a stranger. Like a stranger in my home. My so-called friends stop being friendly. Oh, but you can't give a good man.
That's right, Al.
I came home with attention about 5 or 6 years ago. I came home with attention about 5 or 6 years ago. I went down to 27, just to feel what I was getting. About 5 or 6 years ago. Yes, I did. I came home with attention about 5 or 6 years ago. When my whole town won't accept me, just don't feel welcome, you know. I'm like a stranger. Like a stranger in my home. Like a stranger. Like a stranger in my home. My so-called friends, we're friendly. Oh, but you can't give a good man. About 5 or 6 years ago. I came home with attention about 5 or 6 years ago. My so-called friends come in friendly. Oh, but you can't give us a you can't give us a
Thank you, Mr. A. Period P, for that very special musical message. We're going to stop that share. And you wonder, what does that have to do with dynamic freedoms or any of the history of the United States? Well, of course, that all play in, but I have a quote from Henry Ward Beecher that I think suits it. And the quote is, every today has two handles. You can take hold of tomorrow with the handle of anxiety, or you can take hold of it with the handle of faith. So that's what I have to say about that. What we're going to read today as our main reading is the Declaration of Independence. And right here you can see there's a great picture of the Liberty Bell. And We've learned so many things about our history that we didn't know, but I find this also interesting at this juncture in our journey together. And it says, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the law of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of the ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing in powers in such form as to them seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that government, long established, should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all expense has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariable the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation, till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with many firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization in foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of the anew appropriation of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. Man, he has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial, from punishments for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English law in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for instructing the same absolute right into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizen, taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioner of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, who know rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction. Right, they weren't savages of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been waiting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend us an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind. enemies in war, in peace, friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these United States are, and of the right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connections between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Well, alrighty then. You know, it's amazing. You can read a book many times to yourself. But when you read it out loud and you're living in that eternal now moment and you get all these revelations come to you, even though I know this, I never realized that in that very part that we just read was the story of my own Glasscock's involvement in government and why he was murdered. Wow. So I'm going to have to think about that, but I want to keep this video short and read you something else that's going to tie in something that I find very synchronistic. Okay. So the fraternal side of my family, as you know, you've heard it a million times, is Glasscock, and variations on that may have two S's, and the origin of the name comes from Glasgow, Glassco, I believe. And my maternal side, my mom's maiden name was Mitchell, you know, when she married my dad, right? And so what this is the Glasscock family quarterly, and it's from 1985. And of course, there's this scribe, and you know, you guys know I'm a scribe. So there's a scribe that put this booklet together, and he has a marriage here, and it says Martha Alice Glasscock and Robert Edgar Mitchell were married at noon Saturday, February 23rd, 1985, at South Highland Presbyterian Church in Birmingham, Alabama. Parents of the couple are Mr. and Mrs. Larry Marion Glasscock of Coleman, Alabama, and Dr. and Mrs. Robert Edgar Mitchell, Jr. of Richmond, Virginia. The couple will live in Birmingham, Alabama. From the Birmingham News, February 24th, 1985. And you know, when they were consummating their marriage, believe it or not, they were celebrating the anniversary of the first day I took breath on planet Earth. This time, my birthday is February 25th. So, you learn something new every day, right? Let's see. One more thing. Someone shared this earlier. If you want to go to congress.gov, United States legislative information, they're talking about HR 2417, the 113th Congress, 2013-2014, security, high voltage infrastructure for electricity from Lethal Damage Act. Why is that important? Because those of you in the know realize that we're dealing with glitches from the 2013 time loop. So just a little more confirmation of spirit for my dear friends. And I will talk to y'all soon. Thanks for sitting in on another reading from Dynamic Freedoms. And I will be reading the book in its entirety and bringing it into a format here on Sophia's Emporium. You've been initiated. Peace, love, and light from the big yellow house on the third cosmic ray.